Ryan, thank you for your vulnerability. And I was so hoping that you would share your January 25th story. And I was actually there the morning at that character breakfast in 2018. And I remember a chill went up down my spine when you said that day, this is my 20th anniversary to the day of my last drink, and the commitment I made to character. I mean, it was such a beautiful story that day, great story today. I'm so glad you went there. And I've had the privilege of being the keynote speaker at that same event twice, that Mayor's Character Breakfast. But one of my favorite years was the year you got to speak. So thank you for going there. You left us a lot to think about here. In the scripture that you shared is, that Deuteronomy 6 is the Shema. It's love the Lord with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then, of course, on the tail end of that Luke passage, the guy asks Jesus, so who is my neighbor? And then he goes into the Good Samaritan story. And you just brought a lot of life to that verse with loving, leading, and denying. So I'd like to open up to the guys. Maybe they got a question related to your story, to this scripture. And let me start the questions so the guys can get a little warmed up here. But you mentioned these mission trips that you went to with your wife. How has the mission trips changed you, changed your life, changed your marriage? And I'm thrilled to hear that you were able to bring your 11-year-old son, Micah, or at least she was able to bring him on the last trip. Talk about the impact of that because that's really a denying self opportunity when you go to a third world country like Guatemala and share. How has that impacted you and your family to deny yourself that way?
Well, it's my wife's passion. She's a registered nurse, not actively working now with our 4 kids and homeschooling a couple of days a week. But she became a nurse because she fell in love with missions trips in high school and wanted to be able to participate in medical missions trips and someday lead medical missions trips. So, I mean, she's been to Mexico, she's been to India twice, she's been to Thailand, she's been to Haiti, she's been to Africa, and she's been to Guatemala with probably the last at least six trips where our church has gone. We have a couple of villages that our church sponsors in Guatemala, and she's part of the medical clinic over there. So as far as strengthening my marriage, just getting to see her in her passion. I mean, she's inherited my passion at least my vocation as a broadcaster for the Royals every day for 6 or 7 months a year. And while she loves being a nurse, I don't get to go to Children's Mercy Hospital and watch her with the trauma team, as she can just turn on the television and listen to me jabber on for 3 hours a night. So to go with her and see her was very powerful for me. And the obvious things, seeing poverty like that up close, seeing people who are just so grateful for every little thing that they have. I mean, and on one hand, they have nothing and they have everything at the same time. To wait in line all day for this medical clinic and nobody's complaining in line, like they would be in the United States for something free, but just being so grateful for basic medical care. But I can tell you the most meaningful thing that I've done in my life, my wife on one of her first medical mission trips with our church, sponsored a boy. And the great thing about it, she got to meet him and his family, and they just lived in a shelter in the mountains of Guatemala. But for a relatively low price, we could build them a house, a cinder block concrete home that would protect them from the weather, protect them from predators, both human and non-human predators. And so with another family, we built this family house in Guatemala. So when I went in November of 19, I got to see the house after it had been built. And I've gotten to do a lot of really remarkable things in my life. Traveling, broadcasting Major League Baseball, broadcasting 2 World Series. My father was in baseball. I've been around Hall of Famers my whole life. But that's the most meaningful thing I've ever done in my life. When I got to see that house and realize that, here in the United States, whatever house all of us are living in right now, it's probably not our first and only house. It's probably for some of us, it's not our last house, because we buy and sell houses like it's no big deal. But someone had pointed out that house will be in that family forever. I mean, that's a generational home. When the parents are gone, the kids will live there. When the kids are gone, their kids will live there. This will go on forever and ever. And so that was just attaching the word meaning. That was the most meaningful thing I've ever been a part of.
I love it. Hey guys, if you got a question for Ryan, just unmute yourself and go for it. And Ryan's the real deal, so you'll get a real answer.
Hey, Ryan, my name's Steve White. And when you were talking about your last drink, you took me back to a place, 1984-ish. I wake up one day and I'm 26 years old and I'm a drunk. I wasn't an alcoholic yet, but I was a drunk. And you talk about, denying yourself. I couldn't deny myself. And as you were talking, I was thinking of Psalm chapter 30, verses 2 and 3. These were verses that really resonate with me even now. Lord, I called you for help. You healed me. And then verse 3, Lord, you brought me up from the grave. You spared me from going down into the pit. And that pit's a pretty dark, slimy, lonely place. And I really thought, I can remember very vividly thinking, I don't see how I can ever live a day without taking a drink. Well, somewhere between Christmas of 85 and New Year of 86, that week in there, that's the last time I touched alcohol. Thanks the Lord for that. But you took me back to that moment as you talked about that. And I've got a borderline tear in my eye. I'm just grateful that the Lord did that for me. So thank you for talking about that. And I read about Danny Mack this morning too, and I'm a Cardinal fan. Don't hold that against me. But, anyway, I feel bad for him. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah, and Steve, I don't know if this is the same with your story, but the quitting drinking was just the beginning for me. I didn't realize why I drank in the first place. I thought I was just doing what every knucklehead American young man was doing with his buddies. And, sometimes we go too far and whatever. I mean, it wasn't until I really had a problem that I looked at why I was drinking. And then the term self-medicating came up, and I didn't ever think of myself as medicating, but we moved a lot when I was a kid. I think I've probably become more outgoing just because of the nature of my job, but it's not, or at least at that time in my life, I was not very outgoing. But I found that alcohol, as we used to joke about it in college, was liquid courage. And it was my form of medication. So when I quit drinking in 98, that was just the beginning, because now I had to figure out what I was going to do with myself without alcohol. I couldn't go to the bar and hang out with my buddies and blow off steam over alcohol, and at least for a few hours feel like those problems weren't there until the next morning when they were there again. I mean, I had to deal with myself now. My medication was gone. And that's what really ramped up my depression, which came to a head in 2005. So the quitting alcohol part was the first big step. That was the pretending, what are you pretending not to know? But there was a lot of work for me after that.
I agree. And I remember when I quit, I remember thinking, I've got to look people in the eye and actually talk to them about my crutch.
Yeah.
That's pretty embarrassing. Because when I drank, I could tell jokes, to presidents. But
yeah.
And I remember this couple invited me over one night, and they didn't have a TV in their house. And I just remember scared spitless of that, because you mean we're going to talk for 2 or 3 hours? You're kidding, right?
Yeah. What might they see through me, or what might they, find out about me if I have to talk to, and yeah, my mom really helped me, because I thought, like you did too, Steve, I thought, how am I going to go the rest of my life without drinking? And by the way, January 25th of 98 was the third time I quit drinking. It wasn't the first time. So, but I knew this had to be more permanent, but how am I going to do this? And my mom shared with me, you don't have to worry about not drinking the rest of your life. You're just not going to drink today. Give us this day, our daily bread. Just find out a way, find out how you're going to avoid putting yourself in a situation where you're not going to drink today. We'll worry about tomorrow when it comes, but just, you're not going to drink today. And that's how it started for me.
Me too. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
I put in the chat line, Ryan, that negotiating with God is never ends well.
No.
Trying to justify your sin, trying to, it just is and it backs you into a corner, into a hole, and that pit that Steve described gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Jim Martin has put in the chat line a great quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He said, "A man who confesses his sins in the presence of a brother knows that he is no longer alone with himself. He experiences the presence of God and the reality of the other person. As long as I'm by myself in the confession of my sins, everything remains in the clear. But in the presence of a brother, the sin has to be brought into the light." And, that's what you did that day. You brought your sin into the light. You stepped up. You owned it. No more negotiating. No more, trying to navigate this and justify it. And, and I was with a former NBA player named John Lucas, who had, I think, 7 different arrest charges on his rap sheet, trying to play professional basketball, actually professional tennis player simultaneously, and was in and out of jail for all the things he did. And when he came to Christ and made that decision, he said to me one day during one of our chapel services when I was doing this with the Sonics, I said, "John, do you ever think about that old man? You ever think about going back and returning to some of those old vices?" And he says, "Rod, I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me." He goes, "I can't worry about tomorrow. I just take care of today."
Yeah. Take care,
because I think about it all the time. So he said the exact same thing your mom told you and you've told us. Today I can be strong. Today I die to that old man, and now I'll worry about tomorrow, but today I'm gonna stick with Jesus.
And that,
thoughts for Ryan.
In the silence, Ryan, I'll just say it's amazing how you figure out how to do that. I'll make it without this one day at a time, and you wake up, and all these years later, it happened.
Yeah.
Something that seems so insurmountable. Like, wow, it's a huge testimony of the Lord. But back in the day, how could I make it one day? And but you do, one day at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be 25 years for me this January 25th, which and it's just a number, I think, I know there are different programs out there that really celebrate, 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, and that's great, whatever. But I also know that after 25 years, I'm also one day away from starting all over again and creating a new problem. I'm not immune to this, and it's something I constantly think about. Not constantly think about, but I'm aware of. And as I shared with my friend in St. Louis, it's just a reminder. I kept feeling for him, and at the same time just thankful, because I'm not sure how well he knows the Lord, and based on some of our conversations, I'm guessing not. I'm not guessing not very well. But just thinking to myself, that could have been me. I got in a car more than 3 times when I could have been pulled over, and that would have been the end of that. But God protected me, and I hope it's because of an increase in my faithfulness to Him and my trusting in Him that I could have a fulfilled life, minus alcohol and some of the other bad choices that I had for most of my life.
I was going to piggyback kind of off of what Stephen had said. There's a book I had read, and I got to see the guy talk in person, but his name's Ed Milet, and his dad was a really bad alcoholic. And whenever his dad finally stopped drinking, he had asked his dad, he goes, "Dad, will you promise me that you'll stop drinking?" And his dad just looked at him and said, "I can't promise you that." He goes, "But I can promise you that I'll be sober for 1 more day." And after his dad had passed, he found out that his dad ended up helping dozens and dozens of people stop drinking who had alcoholism issues. So it was kind of a, real powerful thing that he was able to help his dad stop. And then his dad was able to help so many other people. But it was a great talk when I heard him over the summer.
Well, I can tell you, Chris, that in my deepest, darkest moments of depression, I mean, I never could have ever imagined that God would ask me to do something like I'm doing this morning. I mean, there was nothing good that was going to come out of my life, or on the next day after January 25th of 1998. I mean, what a mess. How am I going to just survive and hang on to my career and any little bit of reputation and friends that I might have? That there's never in a million years could I've imagined that he would use me for something like this.
Hey, Ryan, the book you referred to, is it still in print? Do you still sell it? Tell us about that book.
Well, the book is called The Shame of Me, One Man's Journey to Depression and Back. The title comes from a chapter in the book that I call The Shame of Man, and how some of the shameful things that men have done in their lives lead to other problems, because we're just not very good at admitting our problems and being vulnerable and being transparent, that by stuffing that stuff down, we end up creating more problems. So my co-author loved the title of that chapter, The Shame of Man. So he called it The Shame of Me, One Man's Journey to Depression and Back. And it's still available. It's on Amazon. I know that. I know there's a lot of other book apps, but yeah, that's, and the only reason I was given the opportunity to write that book is because of my job. And I'm aware of that. And I'm not, if I was doing I say this very humbly, it's not a remarkable story about a remarkable person, but it's a story about a person who's willing to share his story. And as I read through the Bible, is a collection of stories about people that God used that didn't really look on the surface like somebody that God would use, but because of their stories, they give us inspiration and the history behind our faith. And so, but what I hope, what's come out of it though, Rod, is that I know now that God did not put me here to call baseball games, but he uses the baseball games and this platform that he's given me to share this. And the goal is for men to hear my story and feel strong enough to tell their story, because their story might help someone else with their story, and so on and so forth.
I know you and I share a mutual friendship with Mike Sweeney. Talk about the impact of Mike on your life. And I know you've been part of some of his baseball camps. I've been there as well. In fact, we've been together at those camps. Tell me about the friendship you share with Mike, and I know you guys got deep respect for each other too.
Yeah, he came into my life at a very pivotal time. So the rest of that story, January 25th, 1998, that year, 1998, ended up being my last year with the Twins. And then I came to the Royals in 99, and I was feeling very strong about a new life without alcohol. And I come from a Catholic background, and Michael comes from a Catholic background also. And so here I come to Kansas City, and I needed more than someone telling me how to live my life. I needed someone to show me what that looks like. And that's what Mike Sweeney does every day. I mean, he just shows you how much he loves Jesus every day and how he treats people. And so we became friends quickly. We're close in age. I'm a little bit older than he is, but we were both single, and we desired the same things. He was a lot further along in his faith than I was. But we, I write about him in my book. I mean, he was one of the few people that I revealed to early on what I was going through, and he was a great source of strength for me. But we both wanted the same things. And we're both married now. I have 4 kids. He has 6 kids. I've named one of my kids after him. He's named one of his kids after me. And so he says. But but yeah, I think I needed an example. I needed someone to show me what it looks like. And, you know, honestly, when my dad was a manager in the major leagues, there was a stigma about Christian ball players, that they were soft, that they were more interested in going to chapel than they were winning baseball games, which we all know is true. But in a secular world where the goal is to win a game, faith should take a back seat. And so players that were very strong in their faith they weren't winners. They might have been good guys and good fathers and good husbands and all that, but they weren't. There was a stigma attached to that. And Mike changed that for me, because I got to see it from a different angle, and how difficult it was to be a man of faith in major professional sports, and to keep his integrity through all of that. And the fact that he was a winning player, but he knew who he was playing for.
Yeah, that identity issue that you talk about is so critical. And Mike figured out how to play to an audience of one, and he helped you see that as well. So that's so good. Mm-hmm. Paul, looks like you got something to say, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Excuse me. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing this morning. And, you know, the third pillar of loving yourself, deny yourself. For anyone who might see that or sense that or feel it as from a victim lens, thank you for being an inspiration for someone to claim that 1 Corinthians victory. And we'll leave the light on for you if you ever like to come down and share at Shelter KC.
Yeah. God bless you. I've known Paul for a long time, probably coming close to 20 years now, right? Yeah. I was when it was Kansas City Rescue Mission, and one of the first things I realized I needed to do when I came to Kansas City, and this was prior to my depression, is I realized I needed to do something in the community. And I had a friend in Minnesota who lost everything through gambling and alcohol, and he went to a mission in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I was just so inspired by that. And I used to give a little bit of money every month to it. And then I came to Kansas City, and I saw an ad in the newspaper, and showed up one day and got to know Paul and connect with men that I understood. I didn't know exactly what their life was like, but I understood, because that's where I was on my way. And I worked in the pantry. I just sorted food in the pantry, and since become Shelter KC. But, you know, well, I'm glad you brought that up, Paul, because, and hopefully I'll remember to say this tomorrow, but in leading myself, I had been victimized in my life by divorced parents, alcoholism in my family. I was exposed to a lot of things that I don't think I should have been exposed to at a certain age in my life. So talking with a counselor, there was definitely some victimization in there that really hurt my soul. And I didn't ask for it. I couldn't control that victimization. But the shift for me was I could control how long I chose to label myself as a victim. Mm-hmm. So I didn't choose my victimization, but I did choose being a victim. And I justified a lot of my bad behaviors because of my victimization. I had a reason to act out the way that I did and behave the way that I did. And so to no longer claim being a victim was powerful for me. And at the same time, it took my parents off the hook. It took other people who had hurt me in the past off the hook. And that's a hard thing to do, because now these are just my choices and my decisions that have nothing to do with people who had hurt me in the past.
Right. And what's left is love.
And what's left is forgiveness and love. When I chose to not be a victim anymore, it opened up love and forgiveness for those people, and hopefully love and forgiveness toward me for the people that I hurt along the way.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Amen. That's good. Anybody else got something to share?
Hey, Ryan, I appreciate your message and the changes in your life, and what you were saying, and then what Chris referred to is you, a changed man changes men. I appreciate that.
I like that. Thank you. A changed man changes men.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. You know, I had a counselor. I was on medication for 3.5 years to help me with just my intense depression and anxiety. And I had a life coach. My life coach said to me, words I'll never forget. He said, "Is Ryan enough? Or does Ryan need to be a broadcaster? Does he need to be on radio and television? Does he need to live in this house and drive these cars? Or if I took all of that away, is Ryan still enough for somebody to be a friend and a husband and a father?" And so as I began to navigate through that and design my life around, if I was enough, then who would my friends be? Then where would I live? What would my choices be if I wasn't allowing people to live vicariously through me, but I was just living vicariously through myself, if that's possible? If Ryan is enough, what would that look like? And then the final chapter of that, because there still is a lot of self in that, but the final part of that is Jesus enough? And because is Ryan enough was part of loving myself, but it was still focused on me. But if Jesus is enough, when I don't have what it takes to get Ryan through the day, if Jesus is enough, then hopefully, as Jim said, that's what people would see in me. Not that, Ryan's enough, but Jesus in Ryan is enough.
Praise God. Go, Mike. Mike Allen, go.
Hey, thanks, Rod. I was there at the Mayor's Character Breakfast on the 2018. Fantastic message. A lot that you shared today. I appreciate you writing me back. I actually wrote a note to you, and you took the time to write back a note. It's very thoughtful. What I thought that you said at the very end of that address was all about accountability. And I think it was something like saying, on this anniversary, it's ended up you asked me to speak, but I think today I needed you, the audience more than you actually needed me. And very meaningful, that word accountability, and somebody that holds somebody true to themselves. I mean, that message that day was very thoughtful and meaningful. So thanks for sharing again today.
Thank you, Mike. Rod, if I could tell a funny story about that day, just to put things into perspective, but so let's see, that would be 5 years ago this January, it'll be 5 years. So my son will be 13. So he was 7 or 8 years old, and my wife and I decided to bring him to the Mayor's Character Breakfast. He wanted to go. So we got there early and we sat down, and they had this huge buffet, and my son, he can eat. And so he did what every kid does in a buffet. He just piled on his plate in the first half. And at the end of the buffet, the biscuits and gravy were there, but he didn't have any room on his plate. So we went and sat down, and he asked me, "Will you go get me some biscuits and gravy?" And so I got up and I was on my way to the buffet, but I ran into this person and I ran into that person, this person. All of a sudden, whoever's making the announcements is on the stage, and I'm realizing I gotta get to the stage. So I go up there and I give the speech, and something that Mike did not bring up. I mean, I barely got through that speech. It was extremely emotional for me for obvious reasons that, here I am 20 years to the day, and God chose this day for me. And I believe I ended it, as Mike was saying, as best as I could, because I was pretty choked up. But, at a Mayor's Character Breakfast, you need a keynote speaker. But today I needed being the keynote speaker more than the event needed me. And I walk off the stage, and I've got tears coming down my face, and I get a standing ovation. And it was hard to just raise my eyes and just look at the appreciation that I was getting. And I sit down, and my wife puts her arm around me and rubs the back of my neck and tells me she loves me. And then my son leaves over to me and says, "You didn't get my biscuits and gravy." So that's all he remembers about that important day in my life, is that I didn't get him his biscuits and gravy.
That's great. You got something, Scott Ridings?
Yeah, Ryan, thank you for your message of how God continued to transform your life. And, you know, one of the things that struck me is whatever the sin is, right, in our lives, you know, the dying to self, right? That's a daily deal. It's one day at a time, like you talked about. So Romans 7:18 pretty much nails it on the head. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, nothing good dwells. For to will is present with me, but how to perform what is good, I do not find. Mm-hmm. So it's Christ in us, as obviously your story talks about, that will rescue us from whatever those sins are. So thank you for sharing your story. Obviously you're out in the limelight all the time. God is using your story. Every man on here, God can use our story to impact somebody. But to me, that verse is the core of the nature of sin. And you hit on that we can't take sin lightly, you know, and I've been around churches in the past too, that, like you said, kind of a cheap grace type of thing. We can't live that way. That's God did not intend us to. Jesus didn't sacrifice his life for us to take that, you know, lightly. So thank you for your story, and I love hearing you on the radio, and it was great to know men like you that are out there wanting to use their platform for his glory. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. And thank you for that. Thank you for that scripture. There's the love yourself from Luke is there. I think I read something in Timothy last night about leading yourself, being a good example, but I'll include that from Romans 7. So thank you for that. Thank you for that reminder.
And Ryan, you know this, my wife loves you, and she became even more endeared to you that morning of October, I think 2015. It was actually during the World Series, and you and her ended up in the waiting room of Brain Balance, but she wasn't sure it was you. She was just, so here was her line to Ryan sitting there in this waiting room. She says, "Has anyone ever told you look just like Ryan Lefebvre?" And Ryan says, "Yeah, people say that all the time." And at that point, Sarah, who's sitting next to Ryan, just him in the ribs, said, "Ryan, stop kidding with her." And my wife she to this day loves telling that story, and it made her connection to you even deeper. She just loves the way you announce, loves the way you broadcast, but also loves the way you tell stories, and the way you got some great stories. Let me tell you this quick Sweeney story. Do you remember this year you told the story about Mike's high school coach that gave out the Wheaties Award every year?
Special K boxes.
The special K boxes.
Yeah.
I actually know Mike's high school coach. So his name is Robert Beck. And I circled back to Robert the next day and says, "Hey, Lefebvre told this story. Are you the coach involved?" And he and I became even closer connected, and he told me the backstory, but the way you shared it that day was so funny. And then he confirmed it all and talked about, that Mike didn't want to strike out. He did not want to get the Special K award. And so
the backstory on that is that Mike, for his time as a player, as a power hitter, did not strike out very often. And that's not the way the game's played today. I mean, guys go up there we just wail away. And if they hit a home run, great. If they strike out, big deal. But Mike did not like to strike out. And he told the story that in high school at the awards banquet at the end of the year, his coach had 3 Special K boxes. He had the little 1 serving box, a medium box, and then the family size box. And he gave those Special K boxes away to the 3 guys who struck out the most on the high school team. And so that was his motivation. He never wanted to get a Special K box. And I don't think he ever did, but that carried right into his Royals Hall of Fame career.
And so do you know the story that Mike, one of the years, his son was MJ, who's now going to be a senior in high school next year, is already pre-signed with University of Texas. He told MJ, I think he's 10 or 11 years old, if you do not strike out this entire year, like the entire youth season,
wow,
I will take you to any ballpark you want as a treat. And that year, his son never struck out. Big power hitter, just like Mike, is a 10, 11-year-old. And so MJ requested to take me to Fenway Park. So ended up taking MJ because he didn't.
I didn't know that part of the story. That's a great. Okay,
there you go.
Yeah.
There's a little addition of that. So
and I got exactly. MJ, it's funny the interaction with your wife, because my wife did not grow up in sports. She's not a big sports fan. She's become a big sports fan, but here she's in third world countries and people, hanging on to life and just need basic medications like an antibiotic to stay alive. And I mean, she's seen, she's working in trauma at Children's Mercy Hospital. I mean, she knows what real life looks like. And so, we're out in public and someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, Ryan, I listen to you every night, blah, blah, blah." And she would say, "I wish they could just come home one night and see where you put the spatula in the dishwasher." And so I think there was, she didn't really understand it, but now she's the one that when that happens, and I'll tell that joke when someone says, do you look, everyone ever tell you look like Ryan Lefebvre? And I'll say, yeah, I hear that a lot, that she's giving me the elbow now, or she'll see if we'll be somewhere and there'll be a Royals fan with a hat on or something. And she notices that person's looking at me. She'll say, go over and say hi to that person or whatever. So yeah, I laugh now how her attitude towards that has changed.
Right. Hey, Mike, you got something? Mike Bailey?
Yeah, just a quickie. Many, many years ago, soon after I got saved in 2001, went to a Promise Keepers, and Joe White, some of you may remember him, he ran the Kanakuk camps down in Missouri. He was telling this story about a dad and a little boy, his son. And the dad had, I can't remember the detail of it. It doesn't really matter. It's the principle of it. He said to his dad, "Dad, can you just give it up for a week?" Mm-hmm. His dad said, "No, it's impossible. There's no way I could do it." "Well, could you give it up for a day?" "No, that's absolutely impossible." "What about an hour?" "No, I don't think I could even do it for that." "So what about a minute?" Mm. "No, I couldn't even do it for that." He said, "Well, what about a second?" Mm. And his dad said, "Yeah, I think I could do that." And the little boy said, "Well, all you've got to do is join the seconds together." Mm. Mm. Very profound. Wow. Out of the mouth of babes comes some pretty profound stuff sometimes.
And I think, the alcohol thing is an easy one to relate to, Mike, but I mean, I need to apply that to other parts of being a father and a husband as well. Can I not be offended for just a second or a minute or a day? Or can I not overreact to my kids' behavior? I mean, they're just babies. They're 12, 11, 9, and 7. Can I just not overreact and take their disobedience and not take it personally for one day, 1 hour, 1 minute? So thank you for that story. It applies to a lot of things.
Thank you for your message this morning. Very profound. We've all got a story like that.
Yeah.
And until we come to Christ, it's virtually impossible to share it. Mm-hmm. But thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Any last words from anybody? If not, we're going to say goodbye. So here's your chance. Something you want to say? Hey, gentlemen, great to see you.